For Creamer Media's Polity, I'm Shannon de Rehove. Activist and author Sean Davison joins me to discuss his books about helping his mother die. Your book, Before We Say Goodbye, details how your terminally ill mother asked you to help her die. Why do you think she chose to die in this way? And why do you think she chose you, her youngest of 4 children, to help her?
My mother went on a hunger strike to die. A lot of people have questioned her judgment in doing that, but she was terminally ill with cancer, and as a doctor she knew the ghastly death that awaited her from cancer. So she felt by going on a hunger strike she'd have some control over her death. If you stop eating, there's only one outcome, and that is that you die. Unfortunately, she hadn't done the homework on hunger strikes, and if she had, she would have realised that it's not the way to do it. They can go on for a very long time. And in fact, my mother's hunger strike went on for 5 weeks, 35 days, drinking a glass of water each day. Sadly, she thought she would die each day. She kept thinking, tomorrow I will die. And she used to wake up in the morning and say, "Oh God, I'm immortal," hoping to be struck down by a bolt of lightning. This is her sense of humour. But it went on, and eventually she got to the point where she couldn't move her arms or her legs. She was essentially rotting, decomposing in her own bed. Her flesh was decomposing to feed her brain, her heart, her lungs. She got to the point where she couldn't end her own life by her own means because she couldn't move her arms. She was a type of person who would never ask for help to die, but she had no choice. If she didn't ask for help, she would have continued on for maybe another 2 weeks of rotting in her own bed. So it's a very, very difficult request to make.
Why do you think she specifically asked you?
Well, I was her youngest child, and we were very, very close. I loved my mother very much. At that time, I was her sole caregiver. I'd chosen to stay in New Zealand until her death. I didn't think it would come to this, and she didn't think it would come to this. But when the request was made, initially I said, no, I can't do it. But I eventually realised there was no choice. It was what my mother wanted. She was begging to die.
A recent newspaper article claims that you have been inundated with calls and emails from people who wish to die with dignity. Do you believe that it is possible to die with dignity? How would you define a death with dignity?
Since I've been back in South Africa, I've had numerous requests from people wanting assistance to die and wanting knowledge on how to go to Dignitas clinics in Switzerland. I believe it's their right to die if they're terminally ill, and I certainly help them. Why shouldn't I help them? And we're also seeking a law change to allow for assisted dying in South Africa. Dying with dignity is a human right. It's a human choice to take this option. Everyone wants a peaceful, dignified death, and sadly most deaths are not dignified. They're quite terrible deaths. A dignified death with dignity, or with dignity SA, would be taking a drug to help you to die and dying peacefully in your sleep. That would be a dignified death.
Your Dignity SA campaign tours the country addressing audiences on the reasons why a change in law to legalise assisted suicide is a moral imperative and an issue that society has to face. Why do you say this?
Part of the reason for a law change or forming this organisation was because of the overwhelming support I received during my court case and my trial. A lot of that support came from people in very similar situations to what I'd been in, with elderly parents, or people who were elderly themselves, wanting to know what they can do. I believe the current law does not reflect the mood of the country. I believe there's a strong desire for a law change in this country. I believe there's overwhelming support. And let's take this bill to Parliament. We have a draft bill. It can be accessed on our webpage, dignitysA.com. It was written by Professor Landman, who is on our executive committee and the CEO of Ethics South Africa. We also have an online petition which can be accessed from our webpage. We want to show the public support for a law change, and we're going around the country with information sessions like I'm having in Johannesburg.
Do you think that South Africa should legalise assisted suicides? What would be the key principles to guide such legislation, and how could you avoid the abuse of such a system?
I believe South Africa has led the world before in many difficult moral issues such as abortion and religious and cultural issues. I believe we can lead the world again on this very, very difficult moral issue. The criteria that we're using to apply for the right to die with assistance is: 1, it must be the person's individual choice; 2, the person must be terminally ill; 3, they must be of a sound state of mind; and 4, their request must be reviewed by an independent panel, which would include 2 independent doctors making an assessment, not in consultation with each other, and maybe a lawyer on that panel. And the person would have an opportunity to change their mind. After their request is approved, there'd be a 14-day cooling off period, we call it, where they could perhaps change their mind.
So they wouldn't be able to make the decision, and pretty much the next day would administer the
This would be similar to how the law is practiced in Oregon. It's interesting to note that in Oregon, 40% of the people who have their request approved do not go through with it. I think they want the comfort of knowing that they can have an assisted death if they want it. Another very interesting statistic is that countries where the law has changed, the number of elderly suicides and suicide attempts drops dramatically. The implication is that if they know they have the option of an assisted death, they don't attempt to take their own life.
That was activist and author Sean Davison discussing his books about helping his mother die.